launched a company with my co-founder, who was also here on the call in San Francisco. So quick background on myself. I used to work at Google for the last 7 years and decided to leave I saw the boom of NFTs and the opportunity it created. So I decided to leave my job to launch this company. And so I'm going to talk to you overall a bit more about the art market, or like in general, and then how we see NFTs as a way for like facilitating this market, and talk a bit more about our company as well. So as Raul mentioned really well, NFTs is a non-fungible token. So I really see NFTs as a way of ownership for digital assets. So think of an NFT as a way of like simply owning something that's linked to a digital pieces, and nobody can falsify that. So if you sell that NFT to somebody, nobody can actually, like, everybody will know that you sold that NFT, and everybody would agree that this NFT belongs to that person. And so it's kind of, if you take the analogy of like the Mona Lisa, there's like 50,000 Mona Lisa. There's copies of them, but there's just one that's the real Mona Lisa. And so it's kind of like similar for NFT, where there's just one of this image of this digital asset. And so, as Raul mentioned, the market has been extremely bullish in the last few months, with up to like $1 billion in sales for OpenSea a month, which is the largest market. And some projects have sold for close to $1 billion with CryptoPunks, Art Blocks, and so on. But when we look at the art market and the collectible market, it's still a much bigger market than the NFT market, which is currently $18 billion. And just the art market alone is $50 billion market, with like about 31 million transactions worldwide every year. And when we look at this art market, we realize the trend that more and more sales are getting online. So just looking at Christie's in the last year, their revenue actually went down by 25%, but when we look at their online sales, it's grew by like 260%. So we see that people are more and more comfortable to buy art online, directly online. So let's say you have an expensive piece of art. Right now, there's 3 main ways of storing it, right? The first one is Freeport. So if you're not familiar with Freeport, it's essentially like a place in a favorable tax place, usually close to an airport, where you can store your art, and they're expert in like keeping it in the right condition and so on. The challenge with that is that it's extremely costly, and you cannot actually enjoy your art or see your art. Another way you can do it is you can go to a museum, but good luck for finding a art creator who's willing to put your painting. So like if you want to put your painting in the Beaux-Arts, it might be very difficult to do. And so it's very secure, it's cheap, and you can see your art, but it's very hard to access. Or you can do like most people do, you can just leave it at home. It's cheap, you can see your art, but then if you have like a 3-year-old kid, or let's say you have a cat that might damage the painting, you have risk of flooding and so on. So there's a lot of risk associated for like, if you own like an expensive piece, to leave it at home. So when we talk about art, there are a few challenges in trading art. Like there's a lot of friction to trade art, and collectible as well. So when I talk about collectibles, it's mostly like watches, like sneakers, collectible cards, and so on. There's a lot of friction in that. The first one is the lack of trust and authentication history. So if you have an expensive piece and you try to sell it to me, for instance, I would, or you try to sell to somebody, you will have a lot of challenges to do that online, because I don't know if it's a real one. I don't know if it's like authenticated and so on. And so you usually go by like a third-party seller who would authentify it and essentially prove that this is a real one. And that transaction through a third party usually costs a lot of money because they have to take a cut for that, right? Secondly, is the inability to showcase your collection. So a lot of collectors leave their collection in the vault or in the storage or at home, and you cannot really show it to the world or connect with people with the same passion as you. And then finally, you have the lack of liquidity. Let's say you buy a piece, or you're like a watch or like a painting, and you buy it, you pay for it. You probably won't receive it until like the next 5 to 10 days. And there is a lot of risk in like transport of that piece. So art transport is a big business actually, and it's very dangerous because a lot of things can go wrong. So you need to insure it. All of that costs a lot of money. Same thing for if you want to buy something or sell your art to somebody in Japan, for instance, that's very far, and it might be very complicated to ship. So you probably won't sell it or won't trade with somebody globally. And then finally, as Raoul mentioned, high transaction fee. So most of the auction houses usually have transaction fee from like 20 to 50%. And online platform like eBay is about 12%. So all of those make it very, very hard to trade art or collectible asset. So this is where we come in. This is where I believe NFTs is really going to transform the way we see ownership of digital assets. So to put it very simple, what we do with Courtyard, or company, so we partner with the largest security provider in the world, so called Brinks. So if you don't know Brinks, next time you see an armor truck on the street, look at it, it's probably Brinks. They're in every country. So they're essentially the leader in armor truck and storage. And to put it very simply, what we do is we essentially take physical assets, so collectible, if you think of watches, cards, we're going to do with art later down the line, store them in a vault at Brinks, and then create a 3D model of that asset as an NFT that we put on the Ethereum blockchain. And so now that you have that NFT, you can keep it. You can trade it on any NFT marketplace. So you can trade it to somebody like in New York, Japan, Madagascar within like minutes. And the asset still stays in the vault. At any point in time, the new owner of the NFT or whoever owns that NFT at this point can decide to redeem the actual asset in exchange for the NFT. So you can actually burn the NFT and we would ship you the asset globally, essentially. So what this does, it creates a lot of liquidity for trading assets, because now you can, first of all, you can show your collection, you know it's kept secure, but now you don't need to go, like we authentify it once and you don't need to go to like every single person, like a third-party seller or like a watch dealer to actually sell your piece. And so it all comes from the principle to say that as long as you know you can get the asset whenever you want, you don't need to have it at home every single time with you. And so by talking with collectors, this is something that's pretty interesting that they find true, because a lot of their collection, I like to say that we're talking with a lot of investors, and investors usually have a lot of investors have a lot of money. And so when they have a lot of money, they collect stuff. And so they usually have collection and store them in vaults. And so they were all saying like, hey, yeah, I'm actually having all this collection and I never see it because it's in a vault. And so this is how we use NFT as a tool rather than just creating some NFTs. So those are physically backed NFTs. So how does it work in practice? I'm not going to go too much into detail on this, but to put it very simply, we have our dealers and collectors. We verify the asset, store it in a vault at Brinks, create a smart contract that creates the NFT. Those NFT can be traded on any marketplace. And if you want to redeem it, you can always come to us, burn the NFT, and we ship it. So this creates a brand new value proposition for art collectors. The first one, as I mentioned, is liquidity and transparent valuation. So on the blockchain, every single transaction is recorded. And so now you can do like hassle-free. You don't need to, like the ownership exchange is instantaneous because you get the NFT in your wallet directly, and you can trade it worldwide directly. Authenticity is a key thing as well, because now you don't need for every single transaction to pay that additional service of authenticity to a third-party person. So you really cut the middleman by doing it once, and then you can just trade it. Another piece that's very interesting that we discovered by talking to collectors is verified communities of collectors. And so what I mean by verified is we've seen in the NFT space, like if you own a Bored Ape, you can join the Bored Ape community and join this special group. And by talking to collectors, we realized that they said like, hey, I own this painter. I would love to chat with owners of that painter. Or I own this watch, Patek Philippe 5711 or whatever. Like I want this watch. I would love to talk to owners of that watch. And so that was not possible before, where you can have verified communities of collectors and really have like the social aspects where you can connect with people that are similar to that have similar taste to you in terms of collecting. And then finally, you store it securely. You don't have to worry about it. It's insured. So a fun story about this, we at the beginning, we thought of just like renting a warehouse and just put the asset in the warehouse and insure it. And we got like people really angry at us saying essentially that I don't care if you pay me back if you lose the item. I want you not to lose it. It's my item. And so that's where we realized that collectible, like collecting art, has like a more of an attachment to the asset rather than just a financial investment that people put to store their money differently, right? So so now that, let's say, like when we talk about like creating those physically backed collectibles, there are a few things that we can do on top of it that would unlock additional value that we could not do before. And so this is more thinking down the line, long term, what can we do? The first one is collateralized lending. So for those who don't know what collateralized lending is essentially you put an asset that you own as a collateral and you borrow money at a much lower rate. If you were not to repay that money, the person who lends you money can actually take that asset and sell it on your behalf and get that money. And so a lot of people have tried to do collateralized lending for NFTs. The challenge is that NFTs, well, the value is very high. For NFTs, it's very volatile right now. And so here you have an asset, an NFT that's linked to a physical asset that's much more stable in terms of value, and it's stored in one of the most secure places in the world. And so we want to build services where you can actually borrow money. If let's say you have a $10,000 painting, you can borrow like $4,000 by putting that asset as a collateral, and then you can reinvest automatically using DeFi or like finance, like blockchain technologies. We can use it to automatically reinvest it for like yield farming and so on. And so you can have your collection make money for you, which was not possible before. As I mentioned, verified community is a huge thing. Raul mentioned a company that does fractionalize artworks. This is something that will be able to come later down the line. So it's essentially, you can own a 1/2000th of a Picasso, for instance, and they will sell the Picasso after 3 years. And if the Picasso increase in value, you can actually increase in value. Your investment will increase in value. And so a few companies have done that, Masterworks, Rally Road, but none of them have used blockchain so far. And so it's actually much more complex to do it without the blockchain technology. And so this will facilitate that type of investment. And then lastly, I think this one is really key, is the secondhand resale for artists and brands. So artists, like when the great thing about having a smart contract is you can actually code in the smart contract that at every transaction. So how we make money, for instance, every transaction on the blockchain, we take between 4 to 8% of that transaction. You can actually code in the contract that if an artist decides to give to us their artwork, or if a brand decides to directly, imagine like a Louis Vuitton or Supreme drop, and they decide to directly put their asset to our vault, we can actually code in the blockchain that 1 to 2% of the transaction for the next 50 transactions will actually go to the artist. And so this will generate like a way for artists and brands to unlock the secondhand market and revenue for the secondhand market for those artists. So I'm gonna leave it with a few challenges that there's right now. So it's a great technology, and I believe like it's gonna really transform that world. There are a few challenges. The first one is the high gas fee. So for those who don't know what a gas fee is, it's essentially the cost of doing a transaction on the blockchain. Because NFTs have become so popular, the network is very busy, and so gas fees are really high right now. So it cost, last time I checked, about $70 to transact on the blockchain, and so that makes it prohibitive to do those transactions. So there are solutions coming, layer 2 solution and so on. If you heard about it, like that allows for like cheaper, more transaction at the cheaper cost, but this will be really needed if we want to provide like a hassle-free transaction that's cheaper. The second thing is like KYC, which is know your customer. So the problem with blockchain is that at any point in time, you don't know if you have an NFT and you sell it to somebody. As a project, we cannot know who is that somebody. We know the wallet address, but we don't know who that person is, because there's no yet solution for knowing who owns what on the chain. And so that can create a challenge for like everything regarding like fraud. We need to know that Al-Qaeda is not owning one of our NFTs, or those type of like terrorist organizations. And so that creates a bit of challenge. And yeah, and regulation is coming. So there's so much traction in this market that regulation will likely come. It's still very early, so we're at the forefront of like this technology, and so governments are catching up slowly. I think regulation is needed for sure, but we still don't know what shape or form this will look like. And then finally, adoption of crypto wallets is going to be key, because in order to own an NFT, you need to have a crypto wallet. Because the NFT will be in your crypto wallet. And so if we want to bring that to the mass, we need to find ways, and there are companies that really help onboard people in the blockchain, but to find ways of like crypto wallet adoption and education of people. I'm going to leave it with what I believe. So I'm convinced that ownership of assets in the future will be on the blockchain. Would it be with an NFT or some sort of form of NFT? I'm convinced that 10 years from now, I will buy a house as an NFT, and the ownership of a house would be an NFT, for instance. Like instead of going to like a notary where he puts your name on a piece of paper, and everybody agrees that this name on the piece of paper from the notary is ownership of the house, it makes a lot of sense to be on the blockchain for those type of assets, because you don't have this third party man, and everybody would agree that the ownership of that asset is on the blockchain. So it's a long road ahead. We're starting with collectibles. So we are starting with a drop, NFT drop of Pokemon cards. So we essentially buying graded Pokemon cards that we gonna offer for sale as a kind of not a lottery, but you don't know what you get, and you might get like a card between $300 to $50,000 card that we will release in January. So yeah, I'll leave it to that. I think we have time later on for questions or discussion. So.